Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. It's been called the Great Recession, and since its outbreak in 2008, the consequences have been devastating. Spiking poverty levels, rising unemployment have brought misery to millions. Crippled trade flows, curtailed production have sent economic shockwaves throughout the world. The question today is, how can trade and the World Trade Organization combat unemployment and the recession we face? We're very fortunate to have with us today two men who know a great deal about this topic. James Howard, who is the Director of the Economic and Social Policy Department at the Brussels-based International Trade Union Confederation. Welcome. And Bill Reinsch, the President of the National Foreign Trade Council in Washington, D.C. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. James, how important is trade in promoting economic recovery and putting people back to work?
Well, trade clearly has a critical role, and what the WTO can perhaps do best is to encourage its members to prioritize the government stimulus measures that many have undertaken to respond to the crisis. At this moment, clearly there could have been a danger that some of these measures could have been judged to be WTO incompatible, could have given rise to a spate of trade disputes. But the WTO did its part in encouraging its members not to launch such disputes. And on the contrary, the WTO reports have encouraged its members to be confident that the measures taken have not, in fact, led to any increase in protectionist measures. Secondly, though, something that we think the WTO might be able to do more would be to put some pressure on the persistent trade surplus countries to import more. And there is a role there for the WTO in saying more openly that trade imbalances are unsustainable, that countries like China do need to import more to play their part in global recovery. The best way for China to import more, in our view, would be for China to encourage the development of trade unions that would be able to bargain for higher wages for their members. And that would thereby enable them to import more, consume more, would be good for the world economy in general. And thirdly, we think the WTO could start to address the governance deficits that perhaps helped contribute to the crisis, the increases in inequalities that are generally considered to have played quite a role in the beginning of the financial crisis 2 years ago. The WTO needs to start to talk to the International Labour Organization, to other UN bodies, and start to discuss, to open a debate about the role of inequalities, of labour, of wages and working conditions, and the impact that trade has on those as part of a broader discussion of the role of the WTO in the international system.
Bill?
Well, thank you very much, Keith. I think certainly from our point of view, trade is an essential element of global economic recovery. From an American point of view specifically, when 95% of the world's consumers are outside your borders and you're a mature, relatively slow growth economy under the best of circumstances, if you want to grow, if you want to prosper, you have to look outside. You have to export, you have to get involved in trade, and I think that's why the President has proposed his National Export Initiative to double exports in 5 years. In addition, the data that we've seen all suggests that trade is a win-win proposition. You can trade, grow jobs, grow income at both ends of the equation, whether you're exporting or importing. In fact, the data that's been developed in the United States suggests that companies that are internationally engaged, whether they're exporting or importing, in fact, they perform better, they pay better wages, they provide better benefits, and they go bankrupt less often. So we think trade can be win-win. What can the WTO do about it? I think the biggest thing the WTO can do about it is its part to make sure things don't get worse. And they've got two resources to do that. One is their monitoring, and their monitoring of other countries' protectionist actions or countries' policies, and their ability to review countries' trade policies and to identify when countries have either stepped back from their commitments or have taken actions that are inconsistent with WTO rules and guidelines. The other thing they can do, of course, which they do whether they try or not, is use of the dispute settlement body and dispute settlement procedures to deal with offenders. And of course, in that case, they function a little bit like a court. People bring cases to them. They don't go out proactively and seek them. But the fact that the system works, that it functions, that over time it's developed a body of jurisprudence in this area, I think is enormously beneficial to the trading system. People know that if they break the rules, something's going to happen.
Would you share that view, James?
Yes, I think the role of the WTO through the ensuring non-discrimination in the trading system is extremely important. Our members would, I think, be concerned about the potential risks to their jobs that they would see from trade liberalisation as well, in particular, and in part through the Doha round. While we would like to see the Doha round brought to an effective conclusion, we would like to see that happen on the basis of some better guarantees for workers that won't be accompanied by threats to their jobs in countries like South Africa or Argentina, where they depend upon a certain level of tariffs to maintain the jobs in many sectors, and that such a completion should not also be accompanied by threats to regulation of services in particular. So those are two important elements, we think, in the role of the WTO and trade liberalisation at this time.
Is there scope for that, do you think, Bill?
Well, for some of it. I think it's a given that trade accelerates change, and by accelerating change, it has an effect on jobs. We think trade is net job creating, but it's a fair point that the people who lose their jobs on the one hand are not the same people that get the new ones. And so you've got this mismatch of capabilities and talents. And in the United States, at least, we have a significant population of people that have lost their jobs because of trade, and not only don't have a skill set to acquire the new jobs that are being created, but also don't live in communities where those opportunities exist. And I think the government has a real obligation to try to do something about that. For us, that's primarily not a trade policy problem. It's a problem of training, it's a problem of adjustment, it's a problem of education policy, it's a problem of a whole set of things that I confess we don't do that well. In fact, most countries don't do it very well. And I certainly agree it needs to be done better. I'm not sure how much you can expect the WTO or trade policy itself to address that problem.
You think that that there is a scope for perhaps some form of training or skills capacity building that the WTO can be involved in some way, James?
Well, I think so, but not directly. It's also through the WTO working very closely with other agencies, with the International Labour Organization in particular. We'd like to see the two organizations be working hand in hand in terms of looking at the impact trade liberalisation would have in particular countries, and in helping governments to anticipate the problems that trade liberalisation could create, so that governments can then take those preemptive measures to increase spending on training, on unemployment subsidies where that looks likely to be a consequence, so that in short people can regain confidence that trade can play that positive role in their futures.
We agree with that. I think one of the issues here is that sorting out what is an ILO responsibility and what is a WTO responsibility. One of the things that I've been concerned about for a while is the tendency to pile more and more things onto the WTO, in part because the WTO is one of the few organizations that has an effective dispute resolution process. So arguments naturally gravitate here because they have a process that produces outcomes. Not all of the problems belong here. I think one of the things that we would support is a stronger and more effective ILO. If one of the ways to get there is by cooperating with the WTO, I think we'd want to look at that.
James Howard, your final thoughts.
Well, in reaction to the crisis, the WTO needs to continue to do what it has been doing already, reassuring its members that stimulus measures are fully compatible with the WTO system. It needs to start looking at the role of inequality, of labour issues, and their relation to the trading system, part of that global governance agenda, and to put some more pressure on the persistent trade surplus countries to import more.
Bill Reinsch, you have the final word.
Well, that's a nice position to be in because then nobody can disagree with me. I think that the WTO has done a good job so far of preventing backsliding, preventing things from getting worse. It needs to continue to do that. From our standpoint, I think the most useful thing it can do to advance the ball, if you will, is to complete the round, which is not something that we've spent a lot of time on. But I am in part a proponent of the bicycle theory. If you stop pedaling, it falls over. We need to keep moving. There's a lot of issues going on in the round that need to be concluded, and more power to the WTO to finish it.
Bill Reinsch, James Howard, thank you to you both, and thank you to you for watching WTO Forum.